Welcome to another episode of VMblog's Work From Home series. Today we have the pleasure of having Henning Volkmer, who is the CEO of ThinPrint, with us today. How are you doing?
Wonderful, and thanks for having me, Brian and David.
Can you start off by giving us a short description of the company and what it is that you guys do?
Sure. ThinPrint has been part of the end-user computing space for a little bit more than the last 2 decades. Many of you in the Citrix, VMware, Microsoft Terminal Services space probably know our ThinPrint solution. And then over the last couple of years, we've expanded our cloud-based efforts under the ezeep brand a little bit more. We've been working on that pretty diligently this year. ezeep was a launch partner for Microsoft Windows Virtual Desktop at Ignite last year. That's been a really interesting segment of the market that we've been working in for the last few months. And generally just trying to make sure that people have the ability to print in the quality and speed and reliability that they expect, whether they go to the office or whether they work from home or whether they try to go back between the two. Just trying to do our part so that everybody can do the work that they need to do.
So as part of this whole work from home series that we're running right now, obviously we're talking about the pandemic. It's still a major topic these days. How do you think it's changed the way companies are dealing with their employees, and were your customers caught by surprise, or did they already have solutions in place to handle this shift of working from the office and going home?
I think there's been some of both. We certainly have very long-standing customers from the end-user computing space that had very well-designed, very well built-out remote desktop or virtual desktop environments in place. They have, for the most part, been able to scale up relatively easily and integrate new employees into those environments. But we certainly also have seen a large number of companies out there that very quickly learned about what's out there, what can be done with remote desktops, what can be done around printing with those, and had tried and successfully tried, for the most part, to stand those environments up very quickly. We've seen a good bit of uptick in our service provider and managed service provider type business. They have been using their expertise to bring up new customer environments. So overall, I would say a little bit of a odd occasion, but really kind of an interesting moment for the end user computing community to kind of truly show all that it's learned over the last couple decades.
Yeah, and for companies that are continuing to push forward with this work from home model, before we go into too much of the technology side of it, maybe you can tell us in general, how has this affected the people, the connectivity, the infrastructure?
I think we've seen a good bit of strain on the infrastructure. I certainly know from our employees that they have been struggling with the reliability of internet connections. We've had, I guess, a couple natural disaster type situations thrown in, especially over the last couple of weeks, that made things a little bit more difficult. But all in all, I would say things have held up pretty well, and I am amazed at how adaptable people have been and how good of a job they have done to adapt to the new situations, to kind of make them work for themselves. One thing I've kind of enjoyed is that everybody has become a lot more human. We've seen people's faces more. We've seen kind of where they live. We've seen kids run through living rooms or pets showing up on camera. And so obviously not the greatest of occasions, but I think all in all, we have risen to it pretty well and found opportunity to shed some light into the darkness as well.
And can you dive a little bit deeper into the ThinPrint and the ezeep technology and talk about how it specifically helps enable work from home?
Oh, absolutely. We've always kind of initially been building ThinPrint with very constrained infrastructure in mind. As I said, we've been around for a long time. Networks were a lot different back then. Computing capacity was a lot bit different back then, and we've continued to carry this technology forward. And it really had kind of its odd moment in the sun here over the last few months to make sure that we compress print jobs so they get to where they need to go as quickly as they can, even if networks are somewhat constrained. We make sure that we can really work with any kind of printer. So whatever odd printer people might have had at home and that's just rarely used by kids for homework or whatever, we can integrate those. We have our ThinPrint secure tunnel technologies that allows us on the ThinPrint side to just rely on outbound connections from people's homes so that it gets really easy to transport data to people's houses. If you're thinking about the medical community or the financial community, for example, where there's a ton of these ominous back-end systems that produce all sorts of data that needs to get to people, we're able to help with that. And then on the ezeep side, that's entirely cloud-based, that's been a really great solution for all of those who had a little less time and needed to hurry up a little bit more in getting their environment stood up because it's entirely cloud-based. And we have the ezeep hub as an endpoint that can be used for an office, can be used for a home office type scenario to connect printers into the environment, and then just a small application to where the application, or a small app from our side to where the user's applications live to connect them to the print infrastructure as well. We have our cloud rendering features so that we don't have to deal with printer drivers in those environments. We do the entire processing of the job and then just send it down to the printer. And then with all of that, obviously, comes a tremendous amount of flexibility that I think we'll see play out over the next couple of weeks, hopefully. I guess we've seen some of it as some places has opened up more than others. But I guess we're calling it hybrid work these days, spending some time in the office, but also trying to rekindle the connections with our coworkers a little bit more, come back to the office some days, and have technology there in place that really allows users to seamlessly transition back and forth between those environments. I think that's really tricky, especially now that we will probably see, I guess, you could call it a little bit more professional environments. Some of the things that have been stood up kind of hastily just to keep an environment up and running will probably be tied down a little bit, secured more, and with that, things like installing printer drivers becomes more difficult. And those are all things that we can help with, whether that's on a company laptop or a mobile device or your good old virtual desktop or remote desktop. Plenty of opportunity there for us to be useful, I think.
And as you're talking with some of your customers, what's the biggest questions that you're being asked in regards to work from home?
They are kind of all over the place, but I guess you could say initially it was really like, how do we make this work the quickest? Like, more or less anything rough and dirty that was reasonably secure is fine. And now we're really getting more into these conversations of how do we make this permanent? Like, how, if we had time from the beginning, how should we have set this up in the first place? How can we optimize this? How can we integrate things like secure printing, for example, so that users have to authenticate into or at the printer before they can retrieve a job. Some companies are kind of rethinking how they are providing certain infrastructure services in the first place. I was talking to a company from the legal community earlier this week. Yeah, I think it was earlier this week. And they had lawyers just come into the office to print something and then go back home and work on it if they have like mortgage documents or these absurdly long PDFs. They're kind of hard to edit on the screen sometimes. And some people just have their preferences of how they want to do that. So we've been talking to some companies about, could we maybe put a printer in the lobby and somehow make that accessible to everybody, but also make sure that if the doors are kind of open, not just some random person walks in and like grabs what's on the printer tray and all of those kind of things, trying to figure out what options exist so that us and our customers can evaluate how they want to operate going forward.
Yeah, we've talked about the challenges of infrastructure and you know, challenges with bandwidth consumption, with moving things from the office to the home. Security is obviously another big challenge, right? I mean, companies have set up for years. They've had, you know, their perimeters set up. They've had security outlined and positioned for all the employees that come into the office. But now that people are working out of their homes, security has to be a pretty big challenge. Are there things that you know of that companies maybe should be paying special attention to in the security realm?
Yes, I think there's a number of things that are to keep in mind. Like you said, we've been talking about the digital perimeter around offices and so forth a lot, but especially if you're looking into remote and virtual desktop technologies, so much has been done over the last couple of years to make these accessible just from a web browser, and it's actually a really terrific experience these days. And in those types of scenario, it really doesn't matter all that much what kind of device you're coming from, because you're working with your enterprise applications in a secure container, if you will, that is the remote or virtual desktop. And whatever happens on your device happens on your device. Some companies have even introduced mechanisms to try to thwart attempts to the keylog or take screenshots from the device. And all of those things also, I guess, in the realm of security, we're so used to having VPN connections as the go-to for connecting to work, but those are expensive. They're sometimes more reliable than others, depending on the networks. And things like web browser access to a virtual desktop, same thing that I described for printing earlier. It's just an outbound connection from wherever you are, from whatever device you're on, whether that's your iPad in bed in the morning or like a nice home office setup that I still aspire to. All of those things make that a lot easier. And I think printing is one of those things in that scenario where it's a little trickier because the data flows are slightly different. You initiate the print job in your virtual desktop, but then oftentimes the job has to come back outside of that virtual desktop data stream. And that's where both ThinPrint and ezeep can help by having either a piece of software or the hub that I described at someone's house for a very reasonable cost to build that outbound connection so that the job can then be delivered to the user. You could even think about implementing secure print at users' homes if you wanted to make sure that nothing gets left for the kids to find or whoever might roam around. Our personal printing solution, for example, has a very easy QR code application that you scan with your cell phone. So even if somebody just has like a $75 inkjet or laser printer at home, you just stick a QR code on them, you can send them via mail, and then they have their app on their cell phone. And in order to actually make the job appear, they still have to authenticate as if they had walked down the office hallway and authenticated at a $4,500 MFP. So tons of options, and I think there's a lot of technology out there for very, very reasonable prices that will allow those that are not entirely up to date on that technology to build the environments that will really allow them to run very, very efficient businesses going forward.
And what are some of the key technologies that people need to be using in addition to your solution to make this shift to work from home? And also, if you have any tips or tricks that to make people better prepared for in the future, if this was to happen again, now they're already set up in a situation where they're able to easily make that shift back to work from home?
I would generally say that all of us going forward are very well advised to just plan for the fact that something like this might happen in one way, form, or fashion. Hopefully not on this scale and not on this intensity, but just like a random power outage, flooding, hurricane, all of those kind of things. They're always out there. And I think right now is kind of one of those moments in time where we really have the opportunity to fundamentally change how we work and get buy-in from our employees to do that. I've seen that with our team. They've done a tremendous job adapting. And obviously there's our technology, but I think generally everything that's out there in the end user computing industry is very interesting. There's some devices out there that you can stick into the USB port of someone's computer, and it'll boot up as an entirely different device with a secure environment that lets you connect to a virtual desktop that's provided by whoever your preferred virtual desktop vendor is. I would highly advise those who are not entirely familiar with the service providers or managed service providers that can provide desktop environments to talk to some of those companies, see if they don't have offerings that are appealing, and just generally look at how we can build environments that are more flexible. That doesn't mean that we don't congregate and meet in the office as much as we can, because we value connections to other people. But for the same price point that we run entirely office-based companies, I think we can run much more efficient and much more flexible companies that can work from wherever they choose to work.
Yeah, I think that's a key point that we're going to see more and more, right? The question has always been, when this thing is, come to some sort of a completion, will people go back to work? Will people go back to the office and no longer work from home? You talked about it earlier, where you talked about a hybrid, and then I guess at the end of the day, maybe companies don't want people to come back to the office. To your point, there's a cost savings associated with having a smaller footprint. Real estate is an expensive part of a company's budget. So maybe your point of hybrid work and having half your employees at any given time work from home, some are in the office, you think that's probably going to be the norm going forward? I
think so. Like, personally, before all of this started, I did not like home office whatsoever. I work a lot and I enjoy my work, but I liked having somewhat dedicated spaces for each, if you will. I don't mind taking work to a bar and sitting down with a beer and trying to figure out a text that needs to be written, but generally I was always of the opinion that it's nice that I have a space where I'm not working. And I think that's, based on what I'm reading, that's kind of become a problem for some people over the last few months, that they end up working too much. And that's certainly something that we need to address. But at the same time, I know from experience within our company, as well as talking to friends, that there has been tremendous growth for companies, if you will, in terms of their culture, of how people interact and how frequently they interact. And while some people might have technically sat in the same office, they sat in different floors. And 4 months ago, they actually talked less than they talk now, when the company integrated some sort of messenger solution or collaboration tool, whatever you call all of those. And in some regards, people have actually moved much closer together than they have before. And I'm sure there are the financial people that you've mentioned that figured out that maybe we don't need to pay as much money for real estate. And that's certainly a valid point. Ultimately, we're all not just here for the fun of it, but we need to make some money along the way somewhere. But I would definitely argue that just ordering people back to the office whenever that's secure is probably not the most productive solution. There are valuable things that we learned over the last couple of months and will continue to learn that we should definitely take advantage of.
And want to thank you for your time with us and your insight into this work from home situation that we're going through right now. Where can folks go if they want to find out more about your company, your technology, and do you have anything specifically around work from home?
We have some work from home content on our website, but generally, I think a lot of it is still new and very unique to every company's requirements. So if you have a specific scenario in mind, I would encourage you to reach out to our teams around the globe. If you just want to browse a little bit and see what we generally have to offer, either visit thinprint.com or ezeep, that's spelled ezeep.com, and take a look at what's out there. And we have plenty of contact information on there and plenty of people who are very happy to have a conversation with you around any questions that you may have.
I hope you enjoyed this video. If you want to see more from our cloud technology partners, please hit the like button and subscribe. And if you want to get notified next time we post a video, please hit the subscribe and the bell notification. Very important.